Good evening, all of you. Welcome to the day 2 of the online symposium on analytics for business decision making. The theme for day 1 was demystifying data science, and we really gained insights on understanding the various aspects of data science yesterday. The theme for today is applications of analytics in business. Rather than going with gut when taking business decisions about various aspects in the business like maintaining inventory, pricing solution, or maybe hiring talents, companies are embracing analytics to take decisions that improve efficiency and provide them competitive advantage. So, the focus of the talk today by our esteemed panelist, Mr. Karthikeyan, Director and Business Head of Financial Services, Latent View Analytics, Ujjaini Mitra, Data Science Leader at Z5, and Mr. Kaushik Dasgupta, VP E&Y, will be on how analytics is being utilized in various industry sectors and domains. The talk will be followed by the panel discussion moderated by Professor Vanna Srivastav. I request all the participants to post your queries and questions in Q&A. Over to you, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you, Tripti. I welcome you all back to the day 2 of the symposium. Yesterday, we had very interesting discussions on demystifying data science, and our discussions had taken us through the nuances of what data science means. A lot of queries were raised and they were answered, and I'm sure everybody is looking forward to an equally fruitful discussion today. So today on the second day, we are going to get valuable insights from our esteemed panelists into the applications of analytics in business. I'll not waste any more time and let's start with today's session. Our keynote speaker for today is Mr. Karthikeyan Sankaran. Karthikeyan is the Director and Business Head of Financial Services at Latent View Analytics. Latent View Analytics is one of the world's largest and fastest growing digital analytics firm, which helps organizations in their journey of digital transformation. And some of the notable clients of Latent View include PepsiCo, Microsoft, BMW, to just name a few. Currently at Latent View, Karthikeyan is responsible for implementing data-driven business solutions for customers by bringing together the power of data science, machine learning, and other cognitive technologies. To talk a little about his background, Karthikeyan completed his bachelor's from IIT Madras and also his MTech in computer science from IIT Madras, which he later on followed up with an MBA from IIM Calcutta, specializing in finance and systems. He has worked across a large number of organizations of repute, but for the past 20 years, he has been working in the area of business intelligence and advanced analytics, and has played multiple roles, that of consultant, project manager, innovation lead, and delivery head. He has a very strong technology, maths, and analytics background, which dovetails with his excellent understanding of business concepts to deliver results. Today, he is going to be addressing us on the use of applications of analytics and how analytics adds value to a business. So over to you, Mr. Karthikeyan. It's really a pleasure for us to have you here, and we really look forward to a very insightful session from you. So over to you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Vandana. That was a very generous introduction. Thank you so much. Let me quickly share the screen and then kind of start talking based on that. Okay. Is my screen visible? In fact, I should go back. Just a second.
Yes, it is visible.
Okay. Sorry, 1 second. Okay, cool. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for inviting me for this symposium. This is a real pleasure to kind of talk to all of you today. So I think it's been organized in terms of a presentation, and then there is a panel discussions, right? So I'll spend the initial 25 to 30 minutes talking about analytics with a focus on how do you really use analytics to provide business value, right? And so I will paint the big picture here. And then once we get into the panel discussion, hopefully I can answer more specific questions from all of you in terms of your the career choices, the kind of competencies that you need to develop, what are some of the industry use cases and things like that, along with my fellow panelists, right? So that's going to be the whole structure. So moving on. So what I wanted to start out with, I basically have 3 questions. I know that it's just a 25 to 30-minute kind of a presentation, so I'm not going to get into too much of details also, because the intent is to give you that big picture. And analytics, if you really look at it at a high level, is fairly simple to understand, right? And so I have 3 questions which I have here, and I'm going to answer them for you. And hopefully these questions will be useful for you as you start thinking about analytics, applications, how do you really look at business value, decision making, and things like that, right? So the first question I have here is, what is the simplest way to understand analytics at a high level and its relationship to artificial intelligence and machine learning, right? So I don't think I'll have the time to get into all the aspects of AI and machine learning, but what is this analytics all about and how does it relate to these spaces, okay? So, okay, so let me, okay, cool. So this picture has been immensely useful for me, at least over the last 5 to 6 years, where I've dabbled with a lot more of advanced analytics and call it data science, machine learning. There are many terms by which you can call this space. But at the fundamental level or at a foundational level, analytics is a tool to solve business problems, okay, by providing actionable insights to business stakeholders using a combination of 4 things: business, data, math, and technology. That's it. There is nothing more to analytics in the broadest sense of the word, right? You bring in these 4 elements in the right proportions and create those kinds of actionable insights to stakeholders so that they can use those insights to make better decisions, right? Is what analytics is all about, okay? And uh, I want this to be the key takeaway, at least of my specific talk, in the sense that though we get into a few details, there'll be invariably some jargon coming into the picture, etc. But at the end of the day, when you kind of reflect back on what you're studying, what you're looking at analytics, and going forward, what you will execute, get into the industry, work on different aspects of analytics, it'll be good to kind of reflect back and say, okay, what is the business aspect of this problem, right? What kind of data are we using to solve this problem? What kind of mathematical techniques are available for me, and what is the right thing to use for a specific problem, and how do we use technology to kind of bring everything together, right, as a glue of sorts, is essentially what analytics is about. Of course, the outcome being that they are able to deliver those kinds of insights for the stakeholders to take decisions on. Okay, let me add a little bit more flavor to each one of those areas, right? So business, again, all of you, I believe, are doing your management degree, which means that in some sense you are very much interested or very curious about aspects of the business, which, yes, it is important in many other areas of business applications, etc., like ERP, testing, right? I lived my life on data warehousing, business intelligence. Yes, it is important. But for analytics, it's a cornerstone. The cornerstone of analytics is, what business problem are you trying to solve, right? And what I mean by business here is business orientation, which means the curiosity to understand different aspects of the business. Of course, if you have domain expertise, for example, if you're an expert in banking, you're expert in insurance, you're expert in retail, of course, that adds a lot of value. Or you might be a supply chain person, a finance person, or a marketing person. Of course, yes, that adds value to that whole thing. But even if you're not a domain expert or a functional expert, you need to have, every analytics professional needs to have a strong business orientation, which means that you should have the ability to ask the relevant questions from a business standpoint and think of the problem from a business standpoint. So how does the organization make money? Who are their customers, right? What kind of products do they produce, and why are the customers paying the price in order to acquire those products and services? How do they actually distribute the product all the way from the manufacturing location down to the retail level for you to purchase your product? Or if it's a digital firm, you're basically going to use a website or a mobile interface to basically purchase those products, right? And what campaigns do they run? Why do they invest money in these kinds of campaigns? So these are a very interesting and commonsensical way of understanding the business. And again, since this whole group is all MBA graduates, I'm sure you have a way of thinking about different types of business aspects, and you're kind of trained from that perspective. So that's really good, because for analytics, as I said, business is the cornerstone. Data, again, data is something that all of us would have worked with in one way or the other, right? But in my 15 or 16 years of working in data warehousing and business intelligence, I've only dealt with structured data, which is data nicely present in rows and columns, present in databases. You can issue a SQL query to get to that data, right? And you have some column names or even technical metadata to kind of tell you what the data is all about, right? Structured data continues to be important in the analytics world, but what gives it that extra power is the ability to use unstructured and semi-structured data also to add on to the overall insights part of it, which means that there was really no way to get insights out of documents and images and videos prior to the advent of some of these advanced analytics kind of techniques, right? The machine learning techniques and the AI techniques. But now you can actually use those techniques not only on structured data, but you can also use it on unstructured data, which is images, documents, speech files, audio files, and things like that. And also on semi-structured data. The classic example of semi-structured data is sensor data, right? So which is it has some kind of a pattern, but then you really don't know what the pattern is, right? Either you are an expert to understand what the pattern is, or you need to talk to somebody to understand, what is coming out from the sensor. The first 10 numbers could mean pressure of a boiler, right? At every 10-minute intervals, for example, right? So things like that. So you need to decipher the meaning of that data, which is the semi-structured data. But data warrants a separate space within the analytic spectrum because it is not just structured data, but unstructured and semi-structured data on which you can apply the whole range of mathematical techniques, right? Which brings me to the third part of it, which is the math. And math is truly unique to this space. There has been no other domain within the aspect of business application or computer-based business application which used mathematics at such rigor in order to solve business problems, okay? And though we keep talking about artificial intelligence and machine learning, essentially the math is actually a spectrum of techniques that are available for you, starting with very simple data analysis to Excel-based data analysis to statistical modeling, and then you amp it up by getting into machine learning, advanced machine learning techniques and text processing techniques and things like that. But essentially, that's a spectrum of techniques that is available for you. Technology is something that is coming up very fast, or it's becoming or getting into a lot of demand, right, with respect to analytics, because initially most of the analytics use cases used to be pilots and proofs of concept, right, which is even four and a half years back when I started with latent view. Many of our projects were pilots where we address a very specific area, or it's more basically to prove some value, right? But increasingly we are getting into situations where you're now talking about actually deploying them at scale. Think of a recommendation engine on Amazon or a Flipkart, right? There is very sophisticated analytics behind the scenes, but what gives that extra power is the fact that it is available on a mobile interface. It's available nicely on a web interface based on which you can actually use that in order to make whatever decisions you can make out of all that insights, right? So business data, math, and technology coming together in the right proportion to provide those actionable insights in order to solve those business problems or answer those business questions is what analytics is all about. At the end of the day, this is what it is, right? And just to clarify a few definitions, right? Yesterday you were getting into or looking at data science, for example, right? So just to clarify a few things, of course, people use this interchangeably, and you don't have to get hung up on these terms as such. But when people talk about artificial intelligence and machine learning, they typically refer to the data and the math part of it. What data are you using? What kind of mathematical techniques are you going to bring to bear on that problem is what is referred to as AI/ML. When you say data science is a very important aspect of business that you need to consider. What problem are we solving? Is this a problem that can be solved using analytics, right? Or is there some other solution, a much more simpler way of solving the problem in some sense? You don't want to come up with a big deep learning or a machine learning kind of a solution if you can solve it in a much easier manner, right? So you bring in that business and combine it with AI/ML techniques, you're talking data science. To me, analytics is a broad umbrella where it includes technology also, right? So analytics is a broad umbrella. Data science is an aspect of analytics which focuses on the business data and the math part of it. And AI/ML typically refers to the data and the math, which means the techniques applied on the kind of data that we are dealing with. Okay. So with that preamble, let me move on. So analytics as prediction machines, right? And I want to talk about it because as you saw in the previous slide, analytics is a broad umbrella, right? Within which majority of the business use cases right now are focused on using analytics or the AI ML techniques in terms of predicting something. Okay, and the prediction has a specific definition here, at least in the context of this. Like typically when people say prediction, we only talk about the future, right? Oh, I'm trying to predict something in the future. Not necessarily, right? So when you say prediction machines, what I'm trying to define this as, the whole aspect of analytics is about taking information that you have, which is data, right? You've collected a lot of data. It's not only internal to organizations, but also external to organizations, because you have social media data, which are interactions happening across the world. You take information that you have, which is data, and convert it to information or create information that you don't have, right? Which is what I'm calling as predictions. And predictions can be about the past, can be about the present, or it can be about the future. Okay. So just to reinforce this thought, let's say there is an online banking kind of a situation. What is the information that you have? You have information on customer attributes, you have information on product details, you have information on transaction history, right? That is the data. Okay. Analytics is used to convert this data into a specific insight, which is an information that you don't have. In this particular case, the question could be in terms of whether a particular customer will leave the bank or not, right? Whether the customer will churn, right? That's a question that you're trying to answer. You don't have it ready-made as part of your data. So you need to do something in order to convert the data into information or into predictions, right? So that once you get those insights, you can act accordingly. In this case, you would probably want to give some offers in order to retain those customers, right? If they are good customers for you in that sense, right? So another simple example is, let's say a retail a store. It has sales. You have data around the sales across different locations and across different time periods, right? Okay, so that is the historical information that you have, which is data, and you use analytics to convert it into a demand. What could be the demand for this product in all the stores for the next 3 months? That is information that you don't have, right? And so this is what analytics helps you to create, right? And just to ensure that we are clear in terms of predictions, it's not just about the future. You take the case of a voice assistant, right? Let's say a Siri, and you're uttering a word. What does Siri actually do? It actually predicts in terms of what exactly is a word that is spoken by you in order to find out the appropriate action. So in this particular case, the prediction is in the present, is in the current environment. It's not doing anything about the future, right? It is just saying, okay, Karthik is uttering something, and so I need to understand what he is uttering in order to figure out what action should I perform, right? So precisely identifying what the customer said, where so that action is performed, is also analytics, which is in the current phase or the current situation. Okay. And why I'm specifically talking about analytics as prediction machines is because majority of the business use cases are in this space right now. Okay. Uh, the other part of this whole story is you can use analytics as automated decision making machines and automated decision having decision capability, like you see in the case of a self-driving car. But those examples are still in the, I would say, in the pilot stage. There are some proofs of concept that are being done, but bulk of the business use cases utilize the fact that there is tremendous value in analytics in terms of predictions, right? In terms of, and so predictions have become very cheap, and so you use analytics to get those predictions, and then you pass it on to the human decision makers in order for them to make those decisions. Okay. Okay. Quickly moving on to question number 2. I think I probably have another 15 minutes, so I'll just quickly cover that. So question number 2 is, what is the purpose of analytics in the context of business decision making? Why is there such a big interest now? Okay. So if you really look at it on a daily basis, organizations take hundreds of decisions, all the way from should I acquire company A down to saying should I hire this person or not, correct? And these are questions for which business or every person in the business or the departments in the business need answers for, and so they need to take decisions to answer these questions, right? Now, if you really look at it, the overall set of decisions or the set of questions that companies have to answer can be divided into 3 categories broadly, right? You have starting with, you have the strategic decisions, and I will just explain a process so that I can tell you what exactly is the goal of analytics in some sense, right? So you have the real world of business, and it's fair to say that nobody can understand the real world in entirety, correct? So the real world is very complex. There are multiple things that are happening in the real world. And in that situation, a CEO of a company is expected to answer questions like this, right? Here, the CEO is expected to answer questions like, what should be the company's next blockbuster product? Should I acquire company X? Should I expand into country A or B, right? Now, these are called strategic questions because they have much more of a long-term impact. It's fairly abstract in nature, and it's not very easy to take these decisions, right? You need to weigh a lot of different things. A lot of human judgment is involved in order to take these kinds of decisions, right? So those are called strategic decisions. And the process by which a person takes these decisions is they build certain expertise about the real world. Given the fact that you can't understand the real world in entirety, you get some understanding of the real world, you build certain level of expertise. And in the case of a CEO, it's primarily through experience, because they've spent a lot of years in that domain or the industry, and so they understand, oh, I've taken decisions earlier, it was good, bad, they've gotten feedback about those decisions, and that is the experience that they have. And of course, education and training also plays a big part. And then they use it to take decisions back in the real world. A simple concept, you kind of basically build some expertise about the real world. And since you're trying to answer some strategic questions, you need to apply your judgment and in order to take decisions back in the real world. Okay. Now going through the same process, type 2, or go down to the next level of decision making in organizations. You're talking about a head of sales and marketing or a finance team or a supply chain team, right? They are in this particular example, head of sales and marketing is faced with questions like this: what price should I set for my product? What should the next week marketing campaign focus on? How do I handle negative brand perception on social media? Right? As you can see, these are again a little abstract, but not as abstract as the set of strategic questions that we saw earlier, right? And how do they do it? Same process. They build certain expertise about the real world within the sphere of operations or the scope of operations, and they use that to take decisions back in the real world. Okay. Going down to the next level, operational decisions. These are taken on a day-to-day, week-to-week kind of a basis. Here you have a shop floor manager have to take decisions like, how many shifts should I run today, right? How do I improve safety? What is the bottleneck in the process so that I can remove those bottleneck and increase the throughput for today, right? So these are more short-term type of decisions, and these are called as operational decisions. But the process again is very similar. You basically get some expertise about the world. In this particular case, shop floor manager has expertise on the assembly line operations for that particular plant, or probably for a set of plants, depending on the scope that this person has. But essentially, you're looking at a very specific area and you're trying to take these decisions on an ongoing basis. Okay. Now, what exactly happens is something like this. So we saw this picture earlier. You have the real world of business, you have the decision makers, they build certain expertise about the real world, and they use that to take decisions back in the real world. What exactly happens is everybody builds a approximation of the real world. Okay, which the technical term for such an approximation is called as mental model. So if you go into Google and search for how people take decisions and business decision making and things like that, you will hear this terminology a lot. People form mental models, right, which is an approximation of the real world in their minds, and based on that approximation, they basically take decisions back in the real world. So an approximation, as you can imagine, will vary from person to person based on their experience, of course, based on their the feedback that they have received and the way they've assimilated that feedback and things like that. But broadly speaking, the approximation of the mental models, you can think of it like if-then rules, right? Oh, if A happens, B could possibly happen. And then if A and B happens, then C could happen. And that is how they build that approximation about the real world, whatever area of operations is it. Of course, in the case of a CEO, it is more holistic, right? Because they have to look at the organization as a whole. Whereas if you come down to tactical and operational decisions, you're now looking at a specific focused area or the sphere of operations that they are concerned about. But approximation of the real world is how people make decisions back in the real world using those approximations, right? And as you can imagine, the approximations keep changing over a period of time based on, of course, feedback from the real world, right? And based on how the world itself is changing, right? When you're getting more digital, the approximation that people have in the experts have in their minds will also continue to change. And this is very much relevant even for us from a personal setting. This is how we make decisions for, oh, should I study this? Should I take up this? Should I invest in this stock, right? We build certain approximation, or we have some idea of what could happen using which to take decisions in the real world. Okay. And all the slides that I've spoken about, the last 3-4 slides, have nothing to do with analytics, technology, nothing, right? There's pure, simple business expertise by which people make decisions. And this will continue to be important even going into the future when there is a lot of AI, ML, etc. I personally feel that this approximation, the way of making decisions and the mental models will continue to be a very important factor in terms of many of these decisions, right? Now let's talk a little bit about the goal and purpose of analytics. right? So we saw this picture earlier. By now, you probably are getting a little bored with this picture, but this is what we spoke earlier in terms of approximation of the real world, using which you take decisions back in the real world. The purpose of analytics is this pipeline, right? Which is every single process within the business, and also there are lots of things happening outside of the organization that's generating a whole lot of data. Okay, so if you can use that data and apply the relevant mathematical techniques on top of it. Of course, I've just mentioned here machine learning and DL algorithms, but remember, it's a wide variety of wide spectrum of techniques available. Simpler the technique, and if you can solve the problem, that is what we should be focused on, right? Much easier to use it. But of course, certain problems require more sophisticated techniques, right? And then if you can come up with predictions, as I showed you previously, right? The kind of prediction machines, right? If you come up with the relevant predictions, and if you can communicate this appropriately to the business decision makers, then the idea is that it can help them build a better approximation, which means better mental models, using which they can take better decisions back in the real world. Okay, so this pipeline is really the goal and purpose of analytics. Okay, having said that, if you ask me the question of whether this pipeline always works, the answer is no, right? Because there are many failure points in this pipeline. Data, you might not have enough data, or the data could be of poor quality. You might not have applied the relevant techniques, right? You would have chosen a wrong technique to apply for that problem, or you're optimizing for the wrong metric, because of which the predictions that come out of that whole algorithm or the learning algorithm, the model is not correct, right? You have optimized for the wrong metric. Or there could be a communication issue. The way you communicated to the stakeholders might not be correct, or you're not able to think about it from their perspective, or the way the business decision makers understand what is being communicated to them could be wrong, because of which the changes that they are making to their mental models are not appropriate, because of which you are probably worse off in terms of decision making. So suffice to say, that could be many failure points in this pipeline, but the good news is that this pipeline seems to be working for a lot of use cases, right? Especially around customer analytics, marketing, supply chain, finance, all these areas, because of the fact that you have a lot of data. And if you can apply the proper algorithms and get the communication right in terms of the predictions, and also the tell people in their way, right? In the way the business stakeholders can understand what the insights are, then possibly it can help them to take better decisions back in the real world. Okay, so this is really the goal and purpose of analytics. And as I said, there are many failure points in the pipeline, and also the fact that machine learning by itself, or the techniques that are being used by itself, also have limitations. Right? One classic limitation is machine learning cannot provide you cause and effect relationship, right? There is no causal inference that's out of the box. So you need to do a lot of things to ensure that you can actually get a causal thinking going from a machine learning or from an analytics perspective, right? So there are limitations to machine learning. I will not get into it. Probably I can discuss a little bit as part of the panel discussion. But the bottom line is, if this pipeline works, and it seems to be working in a lot of cases, then it's great, right? Because now you have an understanding of the world, a much better understanding of the world through the data, and then you can use this to take better decisions back in the real world. Okay. So important to remember that human judgment would still be required in order to make the appropriate decisions in the real world. That is what this picture is showing, that there is a human in the loop, which means the business decision makers are still humans who use this insight coming in from the analytics pipeline and use it to take decisions back in the real world using their judgment. Okay. Now, it is quite possible that you could replace the decision maker with an AI agent, right? And it can take automated decisions. As I said, that will be the next wave of AI applications, and how that's going to pan out, especially considering all the moral and ethical dimensions of decision making. We will have to see how it pans out. It could be applicable in certain situations, not applicable in certain other situations. So we will have to see how this evolves. But the idea is that if you can build a proper AI agent, which can not only get those insights out for you, but also can help take decisions in an automated manner, possibly you could take even better decisions. But the problem is, you really don't know what the mental models of such AI agents are, because we know, at least as humans, we know approximately how we think, right? Even though we might not be, both of us will not be thinking in the same way, but at least I know that you will be thinking like based on if then kind of rules, but we don't know how an AI agent will actually think. And that is where there's a whole aspect of reward engineering, reinforcement learning, and all those things are being piloted in order to figure out how do we use AI from a decision making perspective. Okay, so this is the other, as I call, the next wave of AI application that could come up, and we will have to see how it pans out. Okay, so my last question is, Why is this the right time to learn analytics concepts and techniques? So one reason I would say is because there are a lot of use cases across industries. And from my vantage point, I basically take care of financial services, insurance, and retail, his CPG and hospitality verticals within Latent View. And I can see definitely an increase in the number of use cases, the types of use cases, etc. And this is just a report from McKinsey that talks about the usage of ML and AI, right, across different industries, the kind of problems it solves and things like that. So you can take a look at it. And similarly, many other analysts have put out, a lot of consulting companies and analysts have put out reports. It talks about this. Bottom line is there is definitely increasing usage across industries, and so it could make for a rewarding career. You could solve very interesting and complex problems. The second reason why it is important is because of the divide. So the situation is something like this right now, that data scientists are, it's a wonderful time to be there, right? Because you're beating a lot of benchmarks, you're coming up with very lot of complex models. But on the other side, if you look at the business decision maker, they're not so sure, right? They're saying, okay, does it really add value? Yes, I got my predictions, but then finally I have to set a price for my product. Finally, I need to know what kind of a discount, how much percentage discount should I offer on my product, right? So it's really helping me to answer such questions. And so right now there exists a divide, right? In some sense where data scientists are kind of struggling a little bit in terms of figuring out how exactly the business decision maker thinks so that they can communicate the results, because it is a very powerful area and a very powerful technique. On the other side, the business decision maker is kind of thinking, you know what, I think it is working, but I'm not getting it. And unless I get it, I'm not going to go back and implement it because I need to weigh the risk involved in taking decisions also, right? It's probably my job on the line in some sense. So an ideal situation is data scientists kind of understand the other side so that they can communicate their results in a better manner. And similarly, the decision makers can understand the power of this technology, the analytics technology, so that they can embrace it in a much better manner, right? Is what we are hoping for. And that is why it is very important or investing time and effort to learn this. You could be on either side of this and ensuring that we don't have this divide, or you could be right in the middle, acting as a bridge between the two, right? Between the two sets of people. You could be a consultant, basically acting as a bridge between the technical side and the data science side of the world and the business side and the decision making side of the world, right? So that is another reason why I feel this is important. And my last slide is to talk about why I think this is a very fundamental and irreversible change, is because if you look at it, digital shift is a fundamental irreversible change, and there is no going back on this, and all of us are experiencing this in our daily lives. And this has been whatever accentuated by this whole COVID situation, right? Almost everything is digital now, right? In some sense. So even if not for COVID, there was definitely an acceleration in terms of the digital transformation and the digital shift happening across industries. And inevitably, every digital shift will lead to a data deluge, which is unlocking a lot of different use cases across these different areas. And for the first time in the history of humanity, we also seem to have the technology power to support it, right? Be it in terms of many of these algorithms are fairly, it's not recent, right? Regression has existed for 200 years. It's not new. But some of these deep learning techniques have probably been more recent. But then having said that, you now have the cloud revolution, you have enough data coming in, you have the open source revolution, because of which all of us can understand the power of these techniques sitting in the comfort of our homes, working on our laptops, right? And for the first time, you're having these two kind of coming together. Because of this fundamental change happening, I feel data science and analytics use cases will continue to accelerate into the future, and we are only scratching the surface of what is possible right now. Okay, so with that, I conclude my part of the session. Thank you so much for your patient hearing, and looking forward to interact with all of you during the panel discussion.
Thank you, Karthikeyan. It was a lot to be talking about. I know the time was limited and you could have given a lot more insights there, but it's very interesting the way you have brought it that right in the beginning, that it's not just data alone. You know, with our business analytics students, sometimes I think data science is so glorified that people kind of get deluged that, and they forget that it has to lead to actionable insights, which is an interplay of business as well as data and maths and technology. And a couple of very interesting points that you had brought in was that of the mental model that you have brought in. And also the way in the last few slides you brought out the importance of business decisions really set the crux and sets the tone of the entire discussion, because ultimately application of analytics is all about taking it to an actionable business decision which can actually be received well by everybody. Thanks a lot for your wonderful keynote address. We'll take up, I'm sure students and everybody is keeping the questions ready. I'll just move on to the next speaker. I would like to invite the next speaker now. And our next speaker for the day is Ms. Ujjaini Mitra. And we all have seen the way television and media has changed, and OTT has become a major disruptor. So, and that is exactly the area where Ujjaini is working. Welcome, Ujjaini. I think you have you transferred the rights. Thanks a lot. So, Ujjaini is currently the head of data at Z5, and she is heading data and AI solutions and driving data-led decisions at Z5, which is the newest and the fastest growing OTT platform of India. She has had more than 12 years of leadership experience in establishing data as a culture at many large organizations, and her work experience has spread over several industries, from digital media and entertainment to e-commerce, to telecommunications, CPG, travel and hospitality, just to name a few. I think we need to congratulate her for this. In 2020, she was amongst Impact's top 50 most influential women in media, marketing, and advertising. It's really an honor to be able to have you here to speak to us. But Jenny's academic credentials are also brilliant. She's mathematics and theoretical computer science has been her area. She did her bachelor's in mathematics and theoretical computer science from Chennai Mathematical Institute, and followed it up with a master's in quantitative economics from ISI Kolkata. With Jenny, I'd just like to add what I found very interesting in your LinkedIn profile was the fact that you are an active practitioner of Vipassana meditation and Shivananda yoga, and you love to escape to the mountains. So you have a very difficult, and very strenuous work life, and you're able to balance it with giving time for your personal development also. So I welcome you, Jenny. Without taking any more time, it will be great to hear from you about how analytics is used in media. Right? So over to you.
Thank you so much, Vandana ma'am. It's really a pleasure. After I first met Lakshmi ma'am, it's seriously a pleasure to be talking to these young minds and the young talents. Today, I thought I will take people through a specific example to understand, some gamuts of it. So I will share my screen. I hope all of you are able to see my screen. Is that right?
Yes, we are able to see it. Fine.
Okay, perfect. So, given it is talking about the business analytics specifically, I didn't want to divulge into the machine learning, artificial intelligence, all those sections. But I want to cover a very specific example, easy to understand for students to, see that how end-to-end process actually happens in business analytics. Because these days I hear most people think that to be able to design an ML model is probably the only fancy thing, or people think artificial intelligence is the most fanciful thing to be able to do. But if you are a great business analyst, you are no way less than no way less than the artificial intelligence engineers or the model developers. You actually add a lots of value direct to the business from the starting of a business, like even when a startup or a business is starting, from that time till the end of it. So the complete end-to-end strategy mapping is something that you can really do and grow on that path. So even if you just focus at business analytics, there is a great opportunity for you to grow forward. Just a second, how do I go to the next page? Yeah. So about the Z5, I don't, without going into that, I wanted to say that what the data team actually does in Z5, because it's an entertainment space, and whenever you want, you can just switch on, you can watch movies, original web series, news, kids content, and now, we even have a user generated content platform. Like, you can actually create your own videos and upload, and that's a very new kind of entertainment. So what are some of the questions that media industry asks? The first, content, because a huge amount of few thousands crores of investment goes behind creating the content, new movies, new web series, and the commissioning those content. Suppose someone has, or some studio has already created a movie and they are trying to sell it out, so commissioning those content. So there is a big decision that is required, that what are some of those contents that I should create, what are some of those content that I should commission, and how do I curate my platform with all the contents, right? So creation means it even starts at the concept stage. For example, today, if I think that I want to create a movie around the Galwan fight, now that is a concept. Second thing comes in that concept, how do I develop into a story? Now, what is the angle, whose story do I say in a Galwan attack? Is it the major who has lost his life? Am I going to tell that story? Am I going to tell a story of a reporter through whom I am actually showing the whole picture? How do I tell the story? Who are the people who will be the right cast for that story? Who are the main heroes? How those heroes should look like, or the heroine should look like, right? And then, of course, what is the whole presentability? How do I create a trailer, a promo around it? And how do I bring it and present it to the platform? So the whole end-to-end process has a huge amount of data intervention. And today, I am very, very proud that we have been able to successfully embed analytics and a data-driven decision making, and now in an industry and in the section where it is completely driven by art. Because writing a story, they are actually more artistic people, right? So when they are designing the dialogue, that's an art. But can you embed science there? Yes, you can embed science there, and that is what is the beauty of doing the analytics. The second one, to understand who are our consumer, because the consumers are the people for whom we exist. Third question is, when do they come and watch the content? Which kind of screens? That means, are they consuming content on their mobile, or on the desktop, or on the TV, smart TV? Do they use a Geo set-top box versus a normal set-top box with an Amazon Fire Stick? How are they consuming the content? Are they consuming downloaded content? Are they consuming on the go? Or are they consuming during weekend? What are the kind of personas I can figure out about these consumers, so that I can be doing very targeted actions for them? Then, the platform is not always only B2C. There are the B2B partners. Like, I heard Mr. Karthikeyan talking that what kind of business deal is suitable for me. So exactly the same questions get asked by our B2B or the business development team, that I can have n number of partnership. I can do partnership with telcos, with the internet providers. I can do with set-top box provider, with many other e-commerce platform, our payment gateways. But which of these partnerships are going to be a win-win for both the sides? Because if I'm going to a partner with a proposition, then that proposition has to be benefiting my partner. At the same time, for my platform, it should be benefiting. It should be benefiting in terms of reaching the scale. It should be benefiting commercially. It should be benefiting technology perspective, so that there is no gap in terms of the consumer experience. Fifth question we ask is, how is their experience on the platform? So very recently, we have concluded a big research and a big study around what is the people's perception when they come on our platform. Say, for example, even if it's a very negative or it's a very positive, every place there is a certain amount of things to learn, and to understand how they are consuming the platform. What are the user interface and the user experience that they are doing? How do they discover their first content? So when they come to my platform first time, how do they land up to their first content to watch? So if I am actually acquiring a person, or probably they have done a Google search on say Kedarnath or Dream Girl, and they have seen a Z5 search result, they clicked on that and then they came and started consuming it. Or is it that they knew about Z5, that's how they downloaded Z5, came on the platform, and then they actually searched about the content and then started consuming? Or people came just without any specific intention, they searched through, gone through whole multiple trays of informations, chose a particular one, read through the synopsis of the content, and then thought that okay, let me consume this. So what is the discovery of the content on the platform? Why do they subscribe? If people are paying and actually want to consume the premium content, what is the motto behind that? Are they subscribing because of certain movies, or are they consuming it because they know certain genre of content that they like? Are they consuming or are they subscribing because there are 12 different language content, so they know that there are content in my language, in my the language that I understand, and therefore I want to consume it? Or are they coming for certain categories, like they're coming for TV show catch up or for news, live news, etc.? And how are their video viewing experience been? So suppose you are playing a content and in between the content is actually buffering, you of course will not be very happy. Versus if you have a very smooth experience, you know that, oh wow, I clicked, I saw the whole content, I enjoyed it, let me watch the next one, right? So the experience is very important to understand. So all those questions are actually amalgamate to create decision for Z5 as a platform. So, n number of questions that the top business managements are asking, different business functions are asking. Now, to be able to answer all this, there are different kinds of analytics that we do. The first one is the descriptive analytics, and which is where a good amount of business analytics actually works. So, descriptive means what has happened. So far, what has happened? Can I learn how are the things going as far? Today how things has happened, and can I take decision, therefore what will I do tomorrow? Always, and as Mr. Karthikeyan also explained, the prediction not necessarily means you have to apply an ARIMA model, time series model to do mathematical prediction. Prediction also is to take decision that what should I do going forward. That is also a kind of prediction, and that prediction can come based on the descriptive analytics. Next is, of course, predictive analytics. So, for example, if I want to know that given the kind of people who are coming to my platform, what is the probability that, if I bring this kind of content, how much my traffic will increase? And that is where we do the predictive analytics. Machine learning and the prescriptive analytics. So, we have n number of problems, and let's build on the same problem that we were talking about churn. Like, who are the people who are going to move out of our platform, right? So for that, of course, we always start with a descriptive work, and then we slowly move on to create an ML model where we don't necessarily need to sit and build all those things every day, but it is automated. The whole model has been deployed, and every day, it is giving me prediction at an n equal to 1 level, that this is the probability that this person is going, will be stop coming, or this is the person who will not renew the subscription. Therefore, I need to do something beforehand. So that is like a doctor's giving a prescription to you that, okay, you take this medicine and therefore you will be benefited, and your this disease or syndrome will no more appear. So it is actually giving that kind of prescriptive work. And when we give the prescriptive models, it actually helps the business functions. Like, the CLM, which is the consumer life management team, they take this model and they get to see that from this model, we are talking who are the people going to churn with high probability, what are the reasons why they are going to churn, and if I have to mitigate that reason, what are the next best action to be done for them. Now imagine if, from a ML model, this whole end-to-end process has been done, the human intervention and human judgment is much limited at that space. And we will be able to automate many of the regular CLM notifications, emailer, all those things could be heavily automated. But yes, of course, all these things are done at a hybrid level. We start with always human plus machine and then slowly increase the power of machine, but always keep a monitoring on top of that. The fourth one is the artificial intelligence and the cognitive science, and that's where there are multiple use cases also. I'll not immediately go into there. And then there is a very important and interesting section, which is market research and a neuroscience. Now, all these things put together is actually equal to the Z5 data team. And in many organizations where you go, you will actually see that data analytics is actually multifaceted work. It is never just one kind of work, but you can still focus and try to be expert in one thing, or you can say that, no, I want to spread my knowledge horizontally and I want to understand end to end. Now, each of this kind of people get a different kind of career progress. If you want to go deep, where you are building yourself very deeply into one kind of process, for example, you can be very good and an expert business analyst, and that's where you actually work more on the business strategy, decision science, those kind of stuffs, right? On the other hand, you can build your capabilities in depth into market research, and that is where lots of research questions, very complex research questions that you will be answering. On the other hand, if you are more a with kind of a person, then you will be able to do lots of operations related stuff. For example, you are the person who can hold a large team, who can build a large team, and you will be able to deliver, create a center of excellence, who can deliver projects. You will become a project manager and, actually do the collaboration with different businesses. So both the sides are good, and you can choose whichever actually you feel more passionate around. Now, I just thought of putting a framework when you are doing a business analytics, because I have seen people have a wrong conception that business analytics is like an MIS. That people are asking me that, okay, give me ABC data, and I'm giving ABC data, and my job is over. That's not business analytics. Business analytics is really fancy stuff. So it starts with defining the problem statement, because if you don't have a problem statement and you are just digging data, it is nothing but searching a needle in a haystack. And then you can just boil the ocean and start doing n number of analysis paralysis, but you will not end up reaching to a final goal. So always a business analytics starts with defining a problem statement, and clearer and a detailed granular way you can define the problem statement, more specific you can define the problem statement, better are your results. Second step is break it down into smaller component, and those smaller components, if you can have answer, will actually add up to your top level problem statement. Then deep dive each of the component, because if you try to answer at a top level, you will never find the specific answer, and that is why breaking down into smaller component is very important, and finding out answer at those smaller components. I'll give you an example so that you understand each of these steps. The fourth one, derive solution from each of those components. So separately solve as if those are small separate problems, and derive solution to each of these. But the beauty lies when you are able to combine all of those small solutions and bring them as a design the complete solution end to end to the main problem statements. And then a very important and a last but not the least, it's like icing on the cake. It is present through a very simple visualization, right? So you will find that there are people who are actually visualization experts, who can represent a very complex topic in a very simplistic way, so that it feels like, even if you explain that to your 5-year-old kid or your 70-year-old grandmom, each of them will understand at an equal ease. You don't necessarily require a very expert person to understand it. Now that is the capability or the skill and the experience that one should sort of do. Let's define one of the problem statements. So this is the real case. I'm of course not showing you the numbers here, but these pink bars are actually the gross ads. So imagine it is like a subscription business, right? Like in Z5. So every month there are people who are paying and actually added as a subscriber. So that is like a gross ads. People who are actually renewing the so gross ads could be multiple way. Either a consumer coming and joining as new, or they are joining because they have renewed their subscription. So either way, they are the addition every month, right? But then there is something called net ads. Net ads means people I have been able to add versus people who has left me, and then the remaining people are actually called net ads, right? So now so this is when I look at this graph. So this is just the graph given. Can you think like what is the question that this graph can actually bring to me? Because I have to now define the problem statement, because clearly looking at that, I can see that pink bars are actually growing, but the red ones, which are net ads, are not necessarily growing at the same speed, right? So the challenge that is actually happening here, it is like a top funnel versus bottom funnel. So I have to decipher the growth of the higher growth of gross ads. And the question is why net ads are not increasing at the same ratio. That means the number of people who are joining and number of people who are leaking out, it's probably very similar. And that is why I'm bringing lots of people, but equal number of people are leaking out. Therefore, my net ads are staying where it was, or probably it is just growing at a very small, very little pace. And therefore, that's a challenge. So therefore, we define the problem at this space that net ads not increasing is the problem statement, and we have to decipher why is that happening. And we have to decipher why is that happening, and therefore we have to figure out what should we do so that net ads actually grows. So that is what defines it. Now the next level is I have to then break it down, because at this level, at a top level, at a month level, I can't do any analysis. Then we first break it down like a tree structure. That okay, gross ad can come from 4 different segments of people. So this is where you are breaking down problem statement into multiple components. So you are saying that okay, if my gross ad is a challenge, that challenge is coming either from the people who are joining new, or people who are auto renewing my subscription, or people who are doing a manual renewal, or I am actually able to win back because I'm doing lots of campaigns. So people who churned out earlier, they are coming and joining. These are the 4 buckets of people that I can have. And can I deep dive much under each of this bucket to see that which of these buckets are most leaky? So if I know that, then I'll be able to set my priority or able to go and attack each of these buckets separately. Because at a top level, I cannot decide that what will I do. So at every level, then we are further breaking down things based on their what kind of pack they have purchased. Whether they have purchased a monthly pack or they have purchased an annual pack, which is a long validity pack, right? So if a person purchases an annual pack, that's much easier, because then I do not need to really think about month on month retention of those people. But challenge comes when they're monthly pack. If people buy 1 month pack, it's always a challenge that I have to ensure they renew in the next month to be able to reduce my leakage and improve my net ads. So when we look at that and when we look at the actual churn rates, we clearly see that there are certain pockets which are actually big leakage. Once we are able to identify our biggest leakage, then we know that people who are new and monthly renewal, I have to attack them separately, versus people who are auto renewing, I have to attack them separately. And I have to see what is happening. So now what we will do, we will pick up one of this part. So this is called actually a design tree. So this is when you do a problem solving, you will see that there is something called as a problem tree structure. So once you break it down as a tree, it helps you to think through. Now we will pick up one of the tree structure and we will be once again going into depth of it. So like that, so we have picked up the ever new people, the monthly pack buyers, and within that we then further break down that people who are monthly pack buyers, what kind of pack they have bought. Did they buy all access pack, regional pack, which kind of payment gateway they have purchased, etc. Once we do that, we actually now come up with the real challenge points. The top level leakage was getting shown because of few specific pockets are performing very bad. Not everything is performing bad. And then we figure out that, okay, people who are buying an 99 rupees pack through Paytm payment gateway, they are somehow people who are churning 68%. Versus when they are regional pack buyers, this is actually both Paytm and PayU. These are the two payment gateways which are giving me a very big leakage. So with this, we have now been able to pin down the challenges where it is happening and where we should be able to go ahead and target my solution. So therefore, then we start speculating that, okay, what we can do. So here comes the business knowledge and business understanding that, okay, Paytm, why this thing is happening? Because Paytm is like a wallet and most people pay through Paytm by the wallet. It's not necessary you will always keep money in the wallet because most people actually load money just before they are going to pay through Paytm. Therefore, if it's a monthly cyclical process, people may not know that, okay, my pack is getting expired on the certain date, and then I have to keep money so that it will get automatically renewed. And because the money is not there in the wallet, therefore it doesn't renew. So there are multiple steps, but what I want to actually show you quickly is we cannot just stop there. We have to actually drive that what are therefore the final design of the solution that we have to do. And that is where it comes that when you move from business analytics to actually driving the action and the strategies. So that is where we are saying that, okay, for a 99 rupees pack, when people have onboarded on our platform, by weekly level, we want to break down their journey, break down their experience, and how we are able to notify them, remind them to keep their wallet recharged so that it will be able to renewed and they can have a very satisfied journey. They can come and watch anytime. So like that, throughout the process, we do further deep dive and design the whole end-to-end strategy with our CLM team. So what I wanted to remind here is what are the skills therefore required to become a good business analyst. These are some of the skills which are most important. First one, you must have passion to have the business and the domain understanding. If if you are a person who says that, okay, I just want to play with data, then beyond some point you may not be able to connect what you are doing to why you are doing. Therefore, having a passion and acumen to understand the business and the domain is important so that you can answer the why questions, why you are working on a certain problem statement. Second one is data understanding. Once again, it is most important for you to know that what all data is required to solve a specific problem. Is it all internal behavioral data? Will that help me? Will the second party data, like some external data that will help me? Will some third party data, some panels, some research works that will help me? So how often that data comes, in which form that data comes? Is that problem solvable through it? Third one is the coding language. Now, this is important because as the time's going, most of the businesses are becoming a very big data business. And if it's a big data, there is no other way. All the businesses are therefore going towards cloud, and there is no other way other than knowing a Python, SQL, this kind of coding skill to be able to do any kind of data wrangling. The fourth one is storytelling and the communication skill. Now, storytelling and communication, you actually learn over the time. And therefore, it says that business analytics is 40% science, but 60% arts. So it's more art of designing the problem, more art of defining the problem statement, and to be able to solve and to be able to communicate. And practice is the only thing that can make you shine. So never shy away of doing any number of problem statement that comes to you. And you can only be able to shine and grow up if you practice, keep practicing, keep taking feedback, and keep practicing on top of that. So with that, thank you so much. I'm so happy being here, and hopefully we will take questions more in the panel discussions.
Yeah, thank you, Jenny. Thank you for giving such wonderful insights, and your presentation was so detailed. And I know you would have loved to have more time to explain. And what was interesting to understand that how you have given the importance of framing the problem, and how it is how that is the most important part of analytics. Because unless we know the problem, we will never be able to reach where we want to reach. So thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for your wonderful insights. I'll now invite Kaushik. And Kaushik, we thank you so much for being so patient and for waiting so patiently. Kaushik is the third panelist for the day, and I would like to welcome Kaushik Dasgupta. He's currently working as Vice President, Investment Banking Services at Ernst & Young. EY Kaushik is a dream organization for our students, and we all know that it works in the area of consulting, assurance, tax, and transaction services. And it's your association with EY has been for 3 years. Overall, Kaushik has more than 17 years of work experience. Another, Kaushik is also one with a brilliant academic, background. He is a BTech from IIT Kanpur and is an alumnus of Indian School of Business, from where he completed his MBA, specializing in finance and strategy. He's also a chartered financial analyst, and his area of interest includes private equity, venture capital, mergers and acquisition, and angel investing. So today, Kaushik is going to be sharing with us his insights on analytics in direct-to-consumer brands, a concept which is set to impact many global and Indian consumer brands. So it's going to be a very interesting session. Thank you, Kaushik, for joining us and for being so patient. So it's over to you now. I have just one request. Students are requested to please post their questions in the Q&A section so that it can be compiled for further discussion. Thank you. Kaushik, over to you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for the generous introduction. And really happy to be here. And frankly, a little bit jealous as well, in the presence of so many brilliant kids who are getting to graduate and learn a field which is going to really transform the kind of companies that we are seeing coming up. And a bit of background about why I chose something like this. Almost 7 years back, I was working with this company called Biba Apparel, and I was raising money for them from a private equity fund. And the kind of questions that I was facing back then was the kind of questions that I was facing now in 2020 when I'm raising money for some of these what we call as direct to consumer companies. The landscape has completely changed. So I just wanted to walk through some of the thoughts that have really changed the business, walking through what kind of companies have come up, how they look at the customer, the product, how they get to a customer, how do they hunt a customer, how they farm a customer, what are the kind of operational synergies that they drive. So I thought it'll be an interesting 15-20 minutes of discussion, and post that obviously would be great to understand any questions that any of you would have. So going forward, direct to consumer companies. These are companies which sell directly to the consumer without any middleman. So just to run through, for example, certain examples, these are again, most companies, or rather all companies are based out of US. Most of them are, multi-million dollar, billion-dollar companies. Casper has just listed on the stock market. This is equivalent to a company based out of Bangalore, a company called Wakefit, which again has raised private equity money. On the extreme right side, you see a company called Honest Company that is started by Jessica Alba. We have another large company in a similar space in India, which is coming up, a company named Mama Earth, doing phenomenally well. We have a company called Warby Parker on the right side. This is similar to our own, again, domestic company called Lenskart. We have Dollar Shave Club, which is equal to a lot of these, men's grooming startups that have come up. We have Beardo, we have Man Company, We have Ustra and the likes, which are again scaling up really quickly. Then we have Glossier, which is very similar to, again, a Bangalore company, which is again doing phenomenal work in the beauty and personal care space, a company called Wow Cosmetics. I'm sure some of you would have heard of these companies, some of you would have tried some of their products. And we are going to maybe go a little deeper into what is it that these companies do really efficiently, what is this that these companies do really differently, and talk about some of these aspects. So data is the key for them. And where exactly is the data for some of these guys? It's in the customer. What is the kind of customer behavior? It's while designing the product. It's while looking at the operations. It's while getting the first customer, which is what they call as hunting, and then taking that customer to a logical conclusion and skimming the customer, farming through the customer. And we are going to look at each of these aspects in a little more detail, just to see what is the kind of data that is generated at each step. Understanding customer behavior, I thought this could be a great representation for understanding customer behavior. I'm not sure if many of you would have seen this documentary on Netflix. It's called The Great Hack. It concerns itself with, there's this interesting company called Cambridge Analytica, which gathered so much data about people that there are thoughts that it has influenced, for example, US presidential elections, the Brexit vote, and other political campaigns. So data is what has driven such large decision making. So even in our day-to-day lives, right? So for example, understanding the demographics of the customer that you are selling to, understanding where is he coming from, what is his spending pattern, where exactly is he staying, when he visits your website, what is the kind of time that he spends on your website, what is the average session time, how many pages does he visit, how many clicks does he do before he buys your product, right? Does he go to a Myntra or an Amazon and searches for, let's say, a Xiaomi phone and then buys your phone? Or does he actually browses phones and then he goes into a Xiaomi phone? What is the kind of what we call as click-through rate, which means that he sees the product, he sees the price, and then he actually either buys and goes out. So understanding some of these customer behavior is very, very important. And one of the anecdotes that I was reading a few days back on the web is that a father of a girl found out that in his mailbox that he was getting basically coupons on kids clothes, baby cots. His daughter was not even married, and he suddenly thought, why are these guys sending me these irrelevant products? And then he went back to the company which was sending to them, and he kind of admonished them, saying, why are you sending these products? These are not relevant at all. The company apologized, and the person actually came back to his house, and he started talking to his daughter, and he realized that his daughter was actually pregnant, and she was actually browsing some of these products. And because of that, the data actually went out, and people figured out that the girl was pregnant, and hence they started sending some of these products as either messages or in form of coupons, etc. So data is really, really powerful in understanding what your customer is looking at, what your customer is attracted to. Let's look at the second part of the thought process, which is basically looking at the product. So this is a simple snapshot of Myntra. What I wanted to highlight on this page is I have gone into Myntra, and within Myntra, I have looked at casual shirts. So as you can see in the top half, there are close to 50,000 shirts that are listed on the website. And I've sorted it, if you can see on the right, I've sorted it by popularity, which means these are the best selling shirts. So for example, some of the data points that you can see, for example, if you look at the bottom right, you can see out of the 50,000 shirts, almost 13,000 shirts are blue, right? But if you see the top 10, you will see that there are 3 shirts which are red. And you will see that there are check shirts, which are almost 50% of the products. So the point being is when you start designing your products, so you're a brand, you understood your consumer, now you're trying to design your products. Now, suddenly when you're designing your product, when you look at what is selling in the market, you look at popularity, you suddenly see that, okay, I need to design a product which maybe is red. It has to have some shade of red because the top selling products have 30-40% red. It has to be checks because more than 50% products in the top selling SKUs are checks, right? If you see the price point, everything, most of it is somewhere between 400 to 800 kind of price point. So again, so your data is actually right there in front of you, and you are trying to design your product using that, right? So earlier, for example, 5, 6, 10 years back, people used to have designers. I mean, they still have designers, but people did not rely too much on data, for example, for their designing. So right now, what we see is a lot of products are moving towards a data-driven designing. Let's go a little deeper into, let's say, one single product. What's in the product? If you click on one of these products, you will see the table on the right. You will see that, okay, this is not just a full shirt. It is long sleeve, spread collar, regular fit, tartan checks, casual, regular. So there is almost 30, 35 data points that you can pick up, right? So including, for example, what is the color? What is the actual MRP of the product? It's $12.99. It's actually selling at a 45% discount. There are 4 sizes that are listed. So essentially, how to create the product? What is the kind of pricing that you can get? What is the kind of size that you should have? And what is the material that you can use? So if you can gather 30 data points for this entire 50,000 products, you will be able to create a best-selling item, which you know from data is what customers are buying, right? So your product can completely be based on what customers are currently buying out. When you check out, right? So when you check out, for example, this gives you further insights into the customer now. You can see on the left side, the customer is, buying 2 items. Every item is somewhere between 700 to 800-900 kind of items. So we have a concept called as GMV, gross merchandise value, which we generally have the companies spell it out, saying the company is 100 crore GMV, a 500 crore GMV, which is basically the 2098 kind of a number that you see. And then there are discounts, and then we come to what we call as net merchandise value. So essentially, for example, when you're pricing, when you look at the customer behavior, how do you make the customer come back, right? So you first get the customer in, you sell him one shirt, and then you sell him one more, and then the next time he comes, he buys even more. So essentially, getting one customer and then eventually selling more and more to him is what is the mantra for success here. So this is what we call as hunting the customer. You first show him the right advertisements based on data. You bring him onto the web page and show him products which the world is currently buying, and then every few days, every few months, again bring him back and sell more and more products alongside trying to upgrade his average price at which he is buying the product. Once you have the customer, we have what is called as farming. So let's just use an example. Let's say, in this month of July, we spent close to $600 on Facebook marketing. And because of this, we got, let's say, 6 customers. So on an average, we call this as, customer acquisition cost. On an average, we spent almost $100 per customer to acquire this guy. Let's say these 6 people, every person actually spends $100 to buy shirts. So which means in July, the revenue that I made was $600. Out of these 6 people, 1% drops out, which means I have a retention of 5 by 6 in August. And each of them again buy not just 100, they buy 2 shirts each, which means that the total amount that I get is 5 into 200,000 bucks. In September, out of these 5, 2 more drop off and 3 remain, but now they become more loyal customers and they are buying thrice. They are buying 3 shirts each, which means in September, I'm making $900. In October, 2 more drop out, and finally, I have only 1 customer remaining who buys 5 shirts. And after that, let's say there are no customers. So essentially, we have a concept called retention, which means that I will want to retain the customer as long as possible. And over the course of time, I have made a total of 3,000 bucks, and which is what is called as the customer lifetime value. Now, if you look at this has come from 6 customers. So essentially, we talk about it saying what is the individual customer lifetime value? It's 500, which is 3,000 divided by 6. Now, this is the money that the company is getting. But at the end of the day, because we are selling shirts, and this is not the money that I am realizing, because I need to pay my supplier as well. So at the end of the day, I pay out, let's say, assuming 50% out of the $100 that I receive per shirt, $50 I need to pay out to, let's say, my supplier. So which means that overall, out of the $3,000 that I received, 1,500 is the only amount of money that comes to the company. So this is the profit that essentially the company makes. So overall, in this July cohort, we call this cohort analysis. In this July cohort over the lifetime has given the company $1,500. So essentially, I have made $250 per customer in over the lifetime. Now let's look at the simple context of a lifetime value and a customer acquisition cost. So if you remember, the customer lifetime value was $250, and the customer acquisition cost, if you remember, was $100. The lifetime value to customer acquisition cost is a very important ratio that we look at in this industry, which is currently in this example 2.5x. Now, interestingly, if you look back at some of the companies that we just discussed, for example, so we discussed, for example, Wakefit, for example. A Wakefit is basically a mattress company. So how frequently do you buy mattresses? I buy mattresses in probably 5 years, 10 years, right? So which means my frequency of buying is very limited. On the other hand, if I have a super daily, I have a daily ninja, I have milk basket, all these apps I'm buying regularly, which means some of these products I'm using on a day-to-day basis. It means the repeatability will be very, very high. A general metric in this industry is anything greater than 3 times lifetime value to CAC, customer acquisition cost, is considered good. So what would you essentially want to have? Good models are where you have very low customer acquisition cost and you have a very high lifetime value. On the other hand, obviously a poor business model is where you have a very high customer acquisition cost and you have very low lifetime value. So you'd ideally want to be on the left side, of the curve. Quickly going ahead, obviously data is also there in terms of many other aspects. So it's there in operations, for example, where do you set up the warehouse? Where, for example, so if your customers currently, so let's say I am Lenskart, just to use an example, Lenskart started with an app, right? They gathered a lot of data in terms of where their customers are residing. So when they started out building their offline stores, they had that data saying, okay, a lot of my customers are maybe in Jalandhar. Maybe I should start my first store in Jalandhar. And accordingly, then they scaled up because of the fact that they had data. Similarly, when I have to set up, for example, merchandising, which means, for example, the preference of people in South is very different from the preference of people in the North. So what is the kind of apparel that I should keep in my warehouse in North? What is the kind of apparel that I should keep in the warehouse in South? So typically, for example, the warehouses in North, again, typically, for example, the more flamboyant colors are more prevalent in North. When you come down South, you see a more sober color. When you look at sizes, again, here we find people who are slightly more slimmer. When you go to North, you have people who are slightly more, large, extra large sizes. So data actually helps us streamline not just, creating a product, not just selling to the company, selling to the customer. It also helps us streamline our operations, both in terms of warehouses, setting up stores, and what to put in those stores. So essentially, there's a lot of data and a lot of science that goes on behind this. This is where I wanted to, close out the session. This has been a little quicker, but I think an interesting book that I wanted to leave you guys with. It's called the $1 Billion Brand Club. It talks about all these brands that we spoke about. Dollar Shave Club, Warby Parker. There are lots of interesting stories that are there. Essentially, like I said, I think I am envious of the batch because you guys are graduating where like everybody says, data is the new oil. Happy to connect with everybody. Look forward to the panel and the questions that will come up. Thank you.
Thank you, Kaushik. Thank you so much. I know it was kind of rushed, but it was your presentation had still conveyed very beautifully about direct-to-consumer models that we have. And the example of Myntra is what is they read about, and how Myntra is using analytics to actually start designing. So Myntra is not associated with designing clothes, but still that's what it's doing. So that's very interesting insights that you have given. I will now I'll invite everyone to be to switch on their videos, and there are a lot of questions that we have been receiving from the students, though we are a little short on time, but still we'll try to capture as many, because that is the whole purpose of the symposium. So, Kartikeya, a very interesting question I've got from a student. I'll start with you. And Aditya has asked, how, there's something wrong with my audio. Just a minute. Maybe now it is better.
Yeah, we are able to hear you.
Okay. So there was an echo here. So how do you think machine learning can in future predict human behavior, which in essence is defined to be irrational? So while we have, what he's trying to say, while we have algorithms which tell what to do, humans by themselves behave very irrationally. How do you think will we be able to handle this in future?
Okay. You're able to hear me clearly. There's quite a bit of echo on the line. So.
You're audible still.
Okay, cool. Okay, that's actually a very interesting question and a bit of a tough one too, right? So let me start off by saying, if you want machine learning to predict something, you need to have enough data, and the data should capture patterns, right? In terms of what the future could be, right? In terms, you should be able to predict all the different patterns in order to figure out, okay, what can happen in the future. So that's the bottom line, right? So now your question is about, okay, human behavior by itself is very dynamic. It keeps changing, right? So yes. So the answer to that question, a very simple answer to that question is probably you can't, right? You can't predict all types of human behavior and things like that. But taking a step back, what you also realize as you get into analytics and do some of this stuff, there are even patterns in terms of human behavior, right? If you kind of read all the behavioral economics and things like that, there are certain biases, there are certain patterns to human behavior which you can potentially still model, right? So I think the answer to that question is like, yes, broadly speaking, it's a tougher problem to solve. As I mean, if there's a transaction process which is already set, the data is going to have those patterns and you can predict it much better. Human behavior is far more dynamic than that. Yes, so it's a tougher problem. But if you get down to the details, there are specific aspects of human behavior which can still be modeled using the data that is captured on that behavior itself, using which you can predict something, right? Just to add on to that, so that is why it's important to realize that analytics is just one tool in order to solve these business problems. So for example, if you don't have the data, what do you do? That is where the whole world of simulation modeling and whole aspects of how do you create simulations, that works in terms of figuring out what are the different scenarios that could play out, based on which you can possibly collect data or model the human behavior itself, right? And there is agent-based models, there are discrete event models, which helps you to kind of do some of those predictions of human behavior. So it's a combination of multiple things. But yeah, that's a good question, because it's not easy to model human behavior. That is something to be accepted.
That's where the trick is. And Kaushik, would you like to add something to it here?
Yeah, so I think a bit of it, basically, like I was discussing in my presentation as well, and also the bit on the documentary that we were discussing, right? If you watch The Great Hack, they talk about how people are getting the kind of news that they belong to. So even if you look at your WhatsApp forwards, if you associate with a kind of an ideology, or if be it political, be it regional, be it any kind of thought process, you typically get those kind of messages only. It's very less likely that if you don't associate with a particular ideology, you are bombarded with those kind of thoughts. So there is some form of people creating that kind of bias, and in this world, it's making people a little more polarized towards certain opinions, I believe. So it's slowly happening with data. And obviously, in following US elections, every time a US election happens, data becomes at the forefront, and people say a number of things about that. So I think it's an evolving thought process.
Right. Right. So it is an Ujjaini. In fact, interestingly, on the same lines, a student has asked that wouldn't analytics reduce originality in content, given that only one aspect is going to be looked at?
Mm-hmm. So, you know what? I think that is where lots of work around the ethics in the analytics, experimentation in the analytics, all these things plays a big role. So when we are talking that we want to embed data science into analytics, it doesn't mean we are trying to prototype and doing a very monotonous kind of thing throughout the time, right? So there are certain amount of understanding of the consumer, understanding of content that always goes through, but at the same time data also allows us to unfold so many different patterns which otherwise human mind may not be able to undermine, because we as a human can only imagine up to 3 dimension, but the moment you try to work on more than 3 dimension, and that is where it becomes very difficult. For example, if there is a movie like say Kedarnath, I can say that I am watching it because the Kedarnath as a place, because I'm a mountaineer and I like that, that's why it is associates me. But someone who might be watching it because of Sara Ali Khan, someone might be watching it because Sushant Singh Rajput, someone might be watching because it's a romantic story, right? So each person watch it because of completely different reasons, and only when you see the underlining, the content choices, as Kaushik was talking, you will be able to figure out those, very specific traits of people's preferences, which you will be able to model. Now, more and more we can capture it. We are actually able to bring all the more new things into the content. Otherwise, human minds might be able to think only a certain way of success versus failure. So it's more to do experimentations and bringing better things into it.
Right, right. So absolutely bringing in more data and continuing with it. As a lot of our students are second year students, and this question has been asked in multiple ways, and I think all three of you can take it up. That what are the challenges? What is the biggest challenge in rolling out an ML based project? What is the biggest challenge? What happens? This question has come in different forms. Some have asked, what happens if during testing it is fine, but it fails during presentation? So what are the challenges that come when you are rolling out a completely analytics based project? So I think we can have, so Ojeni, you can take it, and then we can have Karthikeyan and Kaushik in that order to take that. Okay.
Sure, sure. So when we roll out, whether it's an ML or an AI solution, it's not necessary that business will always believe into it to start with. So the best way to go about this, the way I do at least, is prototyping. You can always experiment small, experiment cheap, and even if it's a failure, it's a smaller failure. Okay, but through that small prototype, if you are able to show success, then the question comes of rollout. Even in terms of rollout, you never roll out 100%. Like if you're working in an app design or all those, you will see any new feature, any new thing is rolled out 5%, 10% like that. So same way, when we design an ML model, we don't roll out 100% of that to all the consumers. We keep always a target group. Let's work on with the 40% customers. Is it giving me good results? If it gives good results, we observe it, monitor it, and then roll it out to 60%, 70%. And like that, step by step, we roll out to the broader group. One thing which is very important to measure is ML model is nice to build, but even maintaining an ML model is also cost. So that cost versus the revenue, the return on investment that we are getting out of it has to be measured. Otherwise, there are many ML model are actually rejected because it doesn't necessarily generate the ROI.
Absolutely right. Yeah. Thank you. Karthikeyan, I think it's over to you. You will
Yeah,
perhaps add some
sure.
more.
Yeah. One angle that I've seen a lot of challenges in is the fact that if you look at it from a business decision maker standpoint, the decision makers they have a process centered thinking, right? So they are experts on the process. They may be not experts on the data, right? Nor the systems, right? So what happens is in many cases when we develop these machine learning models and analytic solutions, there is a kind of an implicit assumption that the business user or the business stakeholder will kind of understand this model. It gives you fantastic predictions. It gives you great metrics, right, that you have optimized it for. Why is there a problem here, right? I'm sorry, there is quite a bit of disturbance. I don't know whether it's my line. But anyway, so the key thing is to bridge the gap between the process-centered thinking from a business standpoint and the data-centered thinking of AI, ML, and analytics, because AI, ML, analytics is all grounded in data. It's extremely powerful, but then it is still a wall of numbers at the end of the day, whatever predictions that you come up with. But if you look at the business side of the world, it is all processes, it's all cause and effect relationships, it's all those non-linear type of interactions that happen between entities. I think as an analytics person, I first have to realize that this is powerful, but then I need to still talk that language and get onto that kind of that side of the world. That I see as a big challenge. And I feel this community, right, because of the fact that we are looking at MBA folks who are going through this process, I think that's a very important skill to grasp, saying that where does this data centered thinking, what is the power behind it, and where does it stop? What are some of the limitations, and how do you really take it into the process centered and the causal world of business decision making? I would see probably as a big challenge. And as Ujjaini pointed out, there is an aspect of data driven models which we need to focus on in terms of how do you deploy it, how do you get the feedback, how do you monitor it, right? Once you move into that space, uh, getting better data-driven models deployed and monitored is the other aspect of the challenge, right? So,
Absolutely. Kaushik, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, so what I feel basically is that if I go back to, let's say, the example that we were discussing, right? So if you look at, for example, if I use the same data set, let's say if I have a set of, let's say, 100 data points to which I'm designing the 101st apparel. So essentially my 101st will look very similar to one of the 100 or a mix and match of the 100, right? So, if you are always sticking to, let's say, those 100 data points, it's really likely that the creativity might get lost in some way. One of the ways in which we have seen like the Mintras of the world look at it is they go beyond an Indian fashion. They look at, let's say, a global fashion as well. So they bring continuously the data that is coming from an international appeal. So no longer people go to, let's say, a Paris Fashion Week to see what is trending. They just go to Zara.com and see what is trending there. What are people buying? So essentially, and that data keeps changing. So essentially, bringing that data onto not just creating what we call as bestsellers, but what we call as fast fashion. So fast fashion is something that is really changing. And for that, you need to be really agile because that trend will keep changing, right? Be it apparel, be it footwear, be it, for example, in FMCG, some kind of new oil is coming up every single day, right? So you need to be really agile in understanding those things. You can't be stuck on to saying that, okay, this is the data set that I would use and I'll not expand beyond that.
Thank you so much. One last question again, which has come from a student, Sharon. And she's saying that, when we talk about analytics, data, technology, always we have in our mind large organizations. So we'll very quickly, any one of you can take to reply this. What about SMEs, with the push towards being Atmanirbhar Bharat? And, surely they will also have to be brought into it. So where do you think any one of you would like to, who would like to take it? Anyone can take it.
So I can go first.
Okay, yeah.
So I think it's not limited to large companies at all in this age. I think there are at least 500 companies that I know are direct to consumer brands that are coming up, which are on day zero, what they are selling or what they are not selling per se, but what they're banking on is data, right? Swiggy, when it started, the idea was, a data, but it has grown. Big Basket, data. So every single small company that is starting is banking on data. Flipkart, when it started, it was selling books, and that is how they gained, the customer insight. So I think it's not at all related to larger companies. It is getting into the mindset of even the smallest of companies.
Okay, yeah. Karthikeyan, yes.
no, I completely agree with Kaushik, right? I think it's not limited to large organizations. Uh, For smaller organizations, the problem is probably the data. So if you can figure out a way to get your own data, then you're on your way, because the techniques and many of the other things are kind of available, right? It's kind of democratized well enough for people to utilize them. So the techniques or the models is really not the limiting factor. It is data that is the limiting factor. And that is where if you don't have the data, can you buy it, right? Can you purchase third-party data? Can you buy syndicated data, right? Things like that, based on which you get off to a start. And then you have a way of actually getting to the customer data yourself. And of course, there you can combine all kinds of information in order to come up with the relevant predictions and all that. So I would say you need to watch out for the fact that how are you going to acquire data? And so that is why we call it a strategic data acquisition. Once you get that, once you have the relevant data, then I don't think anything else is a kind of a limiting factor. Of course, there is a whole aspect of implementation, driving decisions, which need to be thought through, right? And that's the way I kind of look at it. So it's not really limited to big organizations, is my point also.
Right. Thank you. Yeah, Jenny, probably you would also like to share your views.
So I would, when we are talking about small organization, I would now try to, probably go to more rural kind of, SMEs, right? The tier 2, tier 3 town. Because if you are in a metro or, coming from a that kind of very data savvy mindset, and an entrepreneur is coming from that, it's still very easy to start with data. When I have done few projects in the rural banking, microfinance, those kind of places, where I have seen that because people not necessarily come from a digital background, even teaching them to use any digital devices itself becomes a challenge, and which is where the using data driven decision making actually gets a kind of a bottleneck. But one thing which has made the life much easier compared to earlier time is the cloud system, because cloud cost actually comes as per go. So even when a company is small, or they want to invest at a very small scale, they can still go with cloud, and they can go with a small scale cost. And as their business is growing, or as their usage is growing, that is where the cost can go up. So that's a very good way. Plus, there are other cloud systems like even AWS, Microsoft, or Google. They do lots of works which are very, hardly any cost or very low cost with this kind of rural organizations to make them grow. So I think the data penetration is actually happening at a grassroots level, and the trainings are happening. Lots of people are working, and I think it's just going to grow from there.
Right.
I would want to just add an example here, if it's
Yeah.
okay. So, a few of my batchmates, for example, run this company called MyGate in Bangalore. It is,
Okay.
obviously, it is at the doorstep of your apartment. The most important thing that they gather is data. Who is entering? How many times is Dunzo entering? How many times is Swiggy going in? Who is going out? What are people buying? How many times is a maid going in? There is so much data that they're acquiring, right? And right from day zero, that was the most important point that excited a lot of investors, for example, when they wanted to invest in the company. So this is a small example of a company out of Bangalore which is scaling up really rapidly, but I think data is at the core of it.
Right. Thank you so much. There are so many questions, and but not much time. So I would like to now wrap it up. In the sense, I will invite our dean, associate dean, Dr. Jivananda. He's the associate dean of School of Business and Management, and I just request him to say a few words. Dr. Jivananda, sir, please, it's over to you.
Thank you, madam. It's a wonderful session. Invited speakers for the day, my dear colleagues and dear students. Good evening to all. Hope these 2 days symposium has given you good insights and learnings from the expert industry practitioners. We could see some of the best resource people from various organizations have shared their experience in these 2 days. Business analytics has become very significant for the functioning of today's organization. In fact, data-driven companies that utilize business analytics achieve a competitive advantage because they are able to use the insights to find new patterns, and relationship has been explained by the key speakers today. I could see that they were stressing more on these particular aspects. The importance of business analytics lies in the fact that it helps in gathering a large volume of data at a much faster rate and present it in a visually captivating way. This way, companies can achieve specified goals with better choices on matters like how and where to take the businesses. There are many benefits of using this business analysis in the organization. As already been pointed out, it encourages smart decision making. It provides clear insights through data visualization. It keeps organizations updated. It really enhances the efficiency of the organization. It helps the organization to measure how much of its mission statement is accomplished through this. So these are various benefits of business analytics. I would like to thank and appreciate all the speakers who took time from their busy schedules and shared their experiences and best industry practices with all of us. Thank you all, the speakers. I would like to appreciate and congratulate the business analytics team of School of Business and Management, spearheaded by Dr. Lakshmi Iyer and team for taking many such initiatives to ensure that students get the best learning experience. I could see that business analytics department is doing wonderfully well. Also, this is the second year of its a program, and we could see good number of organizations coming forward to hire our students. The last batch students who have got placed are doing extremely well in the organizations, and they are able to come back to us and they say that the course has been designed in this particular department, business analytics department, found to be more relevant to the industries. Also, the same feedback we received from the industry experts. I'm thankful to the head of the specialization, Dr. Lakshmi Iyer, and the team who are able to do constant revamping of the structure of the courses, taking a feedback from the best of the premier B schools in India and abroad. They get vetted, always the courses are get vetted, and constantly I could see that reinventing the wheel again and again to ensure that the subject, the courses are very relevant. This is very important at this point of juncture. So I thank the whole team. I thank all the industry experts who came and delivered the sessions. Thank you all, and God bless.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your kind and inspiring words. I would now like to take the opportunity to invite Dr. Lakshmi Iyer, our Head of Specialization of Business Analytics. And she has been the brain and the driving force behind this symposium, right from conceptualizing to meticulous planning and finally execution. Welcome, ma'am. It's over to you to wind it up the session.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Vandana, and thank you, Professor Jivananda. Good evening, everyone. So finally, we have come to the conclusion of the two-day symposium on the topic analytics for business decision making, or is it the beginning? So this symposium has been seen the impossible being made possible. Some of the speakers who we always wanted to invite to our university in the past 2 years have actually come here, but virtually, and they've addressed our students. So it's actually made this possible. So here's a quick summary of the two-day symposium. So the day one, the topic was demystifying data science. We had the keynote speaker, Dheeraj Rajaram, mu sigma. So Mr. Dheeraj insisted upon the fact that data by itself is not a new aspect, but has always been with us. So as a student, for students, his advice was looking at a career path or looking for solutions to a problem. EVP and co she advised our students rather than model building. For all of us, data preparation, automate pipelines, and data tagging. Speaker Nishant Saxena, big data leader of Dell EMC, gave a concept of being grounded in their basics while recruited by organizations. Yesterday's session ended with final questions and participants for our discussion. Today, day 2, the topic was application analytics in business. Our keynote speaker, Mr. Karthikeyan Shankaran, Mr. Director, Latent View Analytics, spoke about the digital shift and data deluge leading towards why someone must be actually considering analytics as a profession in the current scenario. Appreciate the mind models concept which he spoke about, which probably as faculties we would consider including as part of our curriculum as well. Ujjaini Mitra, my friend from Z5, she spoke about applications of analytics in commissioning and creating content in an OTT platform. Ma'am, loads of data gets generated while one is consuming content for entertainment. Amazing. Now onwards, should I become conscious of what I'm watching and which screen I'm accessing? Mind-boggling. Kaushik Dasgupta from EY. Great insights in consumer branding, Kaushik. All our students could have definitely related to your talk, which you explained the flow and the process of customer acquisition. Hunting and farming, I like those words. Thanks for the same. Overall, these 2 days have been a learning experience to all our students. I take this opportunity to thank each of the speakers who are here for wholeheartedly sharing their thoughts and experience with our students. I'll be failing in my task if I do not thank the people who have supported us in the smooth conduct of this dream event from the Business Analytics Specialization of School of Business and Management, Christ deemed to be University. First of all, I would like to thank the management of Christ in helping us conducting this event. Our Dean, Dr. Jane Matthew, School of Business and Management, who has always supported us in any of the new thought processes which we come out with. Our Associate Deans, Dr. Georgie Kurian and Dr. Jivananda, who have always been supporting us whenever we come out with this kind of new innovative ideas, and we do brainstorm a lot and finally we get the go ahead. And our HODs, Professor Sirish and Professor Krishna, who have always again supported us whenever business analytics specialization thinks about something new. All our leadership team, thank you very much. Our audience comprised of today the second year students of School of Business and Management and the juniors who are prospects of our specialization, and also our alumni and our faculty as well. And all the invitees for this event, thanks for being part of this symposium. So the organizing team comprising of Dr. Vandana, Dr. Tripti, and the student coordinators who are here, Joseph Alexander and Ananya Paul, as well as the poster design team, Kirti Vasini and Feni Fernando. Thank you very much for being there for us always. Most importantly, the tech support. I can't miss out Mr. Jose Martin, who connected with all the speakers until the last moment. I think he ensures that everything goes on well. Thank you so much, Mr. Jose. And thanks everyone for being part of this event, which we are conceptualized about just 3 weeks ago. And thanks again, all the speakers and the audience who are part of this event. Thank you very much. With this, we conclude this 2-day symposium of analytics in business decision making.
Cool. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.